It's going to be a very interesting fireside chat with another great gentleman and a great business leader, Mr. Arun Kabra. And before I hand over the platform to both of them, let me have the pleasure of introducing both of them. Firstly, it is Apoorva Bapna. Apoorva is currently the Chief Culture Officer at WPP India. And WPP, as you would know, in 2019, it was the world's largest advertising conglomerate. And it continues to be it's among the top 4 in the world. And she's the first CCO at WPP. And since the role was created in March 2020. In this role, she is responsible to help build an organizational culture founded on openness, optimism, and collaboration, and also leading the initiatives and sustainability for WPP India. She's also responsible for driving the diversity and inclusion agenda at WPP for India. And she leads very interesting initiative called Unstereotype Alliance, convened by UN Women for WPP India. With a work experience over 2 decades across telecom, media, advertising, and entertainment and development sectors, she has built a well-respected repertoire across key organizational facets like talent development, business transformation, change management, cultural integration, and business partnership. She has been with WPP now for over 16 years and has worked with the organizations like the Times of India Group, Hutchison Whampoa earlier. A certified coach from Neuro Leadership Institute, Singapore, she also holds a Train the Trainer certification. She is an ardent fan of Art of Living program and loves traveling and counts her 12-year-old daughter as her best friend. A graduate of Lady Sriram College Commerce, Apoorva continues to invest in self-learning through experience and sharing. She is a recipient of Ad Age's Award for Global Leading Woman of 2022 award, and she has been featured on Yahoo's Involves role model list for 2022 for the work done in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, let me have the pleasure of introducing today's other guest of honor, Mr. Arun Kabra, who's going to be having a 5-star chat with Apoorva Bapna. Arun is currently the president of Enterprise Business, the CFO of Times Group of Companies, TimesPro Group of Companies, and founding team member of TimesPro. By profession, Arun is a CA from ICA and a CMA from CIMA London, and also an LLB graduate from the University of Rajasthan. Arun is a well-rounded businessman who shows acute judgment and perspective. He is personable and engaging and commands a tremendous amount of respect amongst the stalwarts of corporate leadership. Arun has held key positions in various multinational companies such as Coca-Cola, Vedanta, Sterlite Group of Companies, ITW, and Tata AIA. Arun has an illustrious career spanning over 20 years in FMCG, manufacturing, engineering, insurance, and education and media sectors. He's a strong proponent of corporate governance and ensures that the highest standards of integrity and ethics are maintained at all levels internally as well as externally. And if you look at his personal, professional awards and recognition, there's a big list, but nevertheless, for more positive time, let me read out some of the most interesting ones that have been showered on him. He was awarded as a CXO of the year 2020 by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in January 2020. He was awarded for exemplary leadership by the Times Group in November 2015, awarded as India's best 100 CFOs by SEBI chairman, then UK Sinha in March 2015, and also awarded as India's most influential CFOs by CIMA twice in September 2015 and June 2016. Over to you, Arun.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. It will be a wonderful opportunity to have a fireside chat with Apoorva. Apoorva has spent an enormous career in terms of creating a level playing field for the workplace. So, Apoorva, we will probably divide today's discussion into 2 parts. One is that what is the mindset and ecosystem around DEI as a topic? And another thing is that how to execute the strategies around the DEI. So with that, maybe we will start a round of questions. But before that, I'm a little curious about your designation, your title, Chief Culture Officer. It's not so common designation, especially in Indian organizations. So what this role all about? What do you do, and how would you explain about this role?
Yeah. Firstly, thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, for the introduction, and Arun, lovely to chat with you today. Coming to the question on my designation. Yes, it is a rare designation, and when this conversation for my role was going on back in 2019, I was very clear that I want to distinguish the chief people officer or the chief talent officer with the chief culture officer. And I say that because a lot of times in the Indian organization, and broadly speaking, we leave culture to reside with the HR team as a subset of what they're doing, and it sort of becomes one of the many things that you do. But we all know, with the times changing and everything, that culture is really the cornerstone of a strategy for an organization, and it really helps build the organization focus on many areas which lead to business success eventually. And I think for my organization, that was clear, because even when when in our 5 strategic pillars as a company in India, one of the pillars is culture. So it was that important for my leadership team to say that we needed to constantly focus on that, along with things around client centricity, simplification of processes, and everything else that's very business focused, traditionally speaking. So I think that was really the genesis of the reason that this role sort of got created and exists today in the organization. Though I always joke with my boss that this is such a nice fancy title, but I hope that it doesn't make me unemployable in future, because most people, when they ask me
Right.
what do you do, there's always this question mark on their head, that what does this role really mean. So yeah, that
Right.
was really the reason.
Right. And also you lead that Unstereotyped Alliance, which is convened by UN Women, and this is run by WPP India. So how important is this entire initiative, and how it is driving inclusive culture for WPP?
So just to clarify, so basically this is actually an initiative that is managed and run by UN Women. Within UN Women, they run what is called the Unstereotype Alliance. And WPP in India is the founding member of this alliance when it came together. It also has other organizations like the Hindustan Unilever, Diageo, Mondelez, Procter & Gamble, and many other communications networks. So WPP is a founding member to this network. What it does from a gender equity perspective, and right now their focus is only women, as the name suggests, from where they want to make this, where they want to bring the conversation on gender parity at the forefront in context of the advertising industry. Because as we all know, that we as humans and we as people living in the society get very influenced by the content that we see, and advertising is one of those big areas where we consume a lot of content. And it can also lead to creating gender stereotyping. For example, we've often seen that ads related to financial sector will mostly have male models, whereas an ad about a washing machine or which health drink to give to a child is largely, you have a mother as the main character. Whereas this sort of council where we come together, we're really looking at helping break those gender stereotypes and also make women, help promote sort of a progressive portrayal of women in advertising, particularly, and that we've seen again in the last few years. For example, some of the advertising which has really broken that stereotype where women lead. Women have played the role, whether it's a Cadbury's cricket ad where the woman is playing the match and the partners cheering for her, sitting on as an audience. Or we've seen, ads from Shell, which is an oil company, where women are driving tractors or trucks and actually taking decisions on what lubricants to be put in the vehicle. So I think so really the council has come together to help break that stereotyping and advertising, so that we're able to look at women in a more progressive fashion through advertising.
Right. So in terms of familiarizing the entire participants to the entire topic of DEI, we can get into some kind of basics, because see, generally DEI is perceived like, okay, something to do with gender equality, but there are broader meanings, and the meanings have also changed over a period of time. We have all come a long way from what we were at 20 years back, but yes, I mean, there is a longer way to go. So if you can explain a little bit more in detail about what is diversity, equity, and inclusivity, what are the meanings, and how the perspective has changed over a period of time?
So, like I said, if culture is the cornerstone of the strategy, then that diversity, equity, inclusion to me are the 3 strategic pillars within that, amongst other things that we focus on, right? Uh, and again, just to give a more theoretical sort of a definition, just for the clarity for the group, there's a very famous quotation by a lady called Verna Myers, which says that diversity is being invited to a party and inclusion is being asked to dance in that party, and that really is how it defines, right? Diversity is where, as organizations, we say that we want to hire people from different backgrounds, different culture, different races, underrepresented groups, and all that. But really, when we hire them, it is also on us to make sure that they have a voice in the organization, that they don't feel marginalized, that they feel they belong to that place where they've been hired. So that is the diversity inclusion piece within, and then equity got added later. If we all remember, right? Earlier, it was always diversity, inclusion, equity. It
Right.
was not a conversation, but equity got added later on because equity is as important as diversity and inclusion, right? It is about giving people, all kinds of people in the organization, a fair treatment, so that all the norms, the practices, and the policies, and everything is in place to ensure that uh, you know we are not, identity is not leading to some predictive outcomes, because you belong to a certain place, therefore you're being treated unfairly, or your unconscious biases are coming into play because you're not practicing equity. So I think that's how I would define diversity, equity, and inclusion, to say that diversity is a starting point where you build an organization where you get people from different backgrounds, etc. Inclusion is really getting their voices heard and making them feel included in the organization. And I think equity is when you are able to truly make them feel part of the organization in such a way that your norms, your processes, your practices, your policies all sort of make people believe that you believe in an equal organization. So I hope that sort of gives the difference between the three, and why are all three equally important.
Right. And see, I mean, DEI initiatives are being taken by many organizations, but I would say that uh, most of the MNCs in India are taking a lot of initiatives. Even Indian companies are also taking, but still, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, where
Yeah.
10 being absolutely compliant and adaptive, where would you rate generally the Indian companies, the general trend? I'm not talking about any specific organization, but yes, I mean, a general trend.
So first, there are different forms of diversity, like we all know, right? So diversity
Right.
obviously not just limited to gender anymore, and within gender, it's not just women, but it's far more broad based, where we talk about people from the LGBTQI community and so on and so forth. Uh, Beyond that, there is also the diversity around, for example, age-related diversity, right? There is also the disability. People with disabilities is another pillar when we talk about diversity. Then there is the whole thing around religious diversity and race diversity, right? And of course, there is the cultural diversity where people in a society are raised with different kinds of values and norms, and therefore they have a different way of looking at things. So these are the different forms of diversity. I think when I look at organizations in India, and again, this is my personal view, that there is a greater awareness on the topic today, for sure, from what it was 10 years back when this was not even a conversation. But have we embraced all forms of diversity in our organization? I don't think so. I think there is still a certain amount of discomfort and lack of awareness, if I may say so, when it comes to these things. Also, I think there is a sense of fear, Arun, in some of these cases, because some of these areas also lend itself to uh, you know political connotations. For example, I mean, we know that race and ethnicity in India is an area which can get into sometimes into an area which is not very comfortable. So I think there is, which means that there is a need to build greater awareness. And why is it important to build more diverse organizations? So I mean, I won't put a number when you ask me on a scale of 1 to 10, but I do think that there is a lot of room for us to to embrace all forms of diversity. And I think we've already made a beginning as a country, and there is a ground to cover, and there is a lot of still stuff to be done in this space.
Right. In fact, actually, if you look at in many organizations, while DEI is taken up as an initiative, but when it comes to the decision making on individual recruitment, also, it is generally kept aside with the leader who wants to actually decide on, and there is no focus on that agenda of DEI, right? So while we all talk about equity, but yes, I mean, in a way we are somewhere very far from the equity horizon, right? So what is your take on that?
So agree completely that again there is a lot of work to be done in that space. For example, in my own organization, we've been talking a lot about pay parity because we see that there is a lot of disparity when it comes to paying people uh, based on what backgrounds they come from. Sometimes it's gender related disparity, sometimes it's uh, it's a depending on which part of the world are you coming from. This whole conversation around whites versus the non-whites, right? So there's a lot of disparity around that. Sometimes when you belong to some minority groups, you're not treated
Right.
equally. So there is definitely an awareness that there is a problem, and I think there are different ways of tackling that problem. In my view, one of the ways that I think could really help is having this conversation openly and candidly, and accepting that we're not at the stage where we're fully practicing equity, but we are keen to practice equity. And it could, one of the things, for example, leaders like in the organization should be given a clear mandate, when they're looking at hiring people, or they're looking at, increments and incentives for people in their teams, that they're totally suspending their agenda. There is no unconscious bias that is coming to play. And that they're clear about what they're rewarding people for. And there are many trainings and sensitization workshops that can happen to help people overcome those biases, because again, these biases are not something people like to live with. It's just that we are born with it, and then it keeps getting reinforced as we grow up, through the society, through the people we interact with, and so on and so forth. uh, I just want to give you another example, which I think most of us know, that equity can be such a game changer for people in a good way. Is that one, Priyanka Chopra, we all know, the famous actress, is now
Right.
come into is obviously living in Hollywood, and she's pretty well known in that industry now. So firstly, the fact that she did make way in a place which was very, very dominated by whites in itself was a big step, right? Which is this whole thing around
Right.
inclusion. But what really brought equity was, when and Priyanka made that point, that when her new series got launched, Citadel,
Citadel.
and and her manager went and when they were discussing her monies, her manager made a point to her to say that, Priyanka, why don't you ask for the same salary that or the same money fees that your co-actor, who's a male co-actor, who's getting? And she said, come on, like, there's no point in asking that. I know that I will not get it. I mean, firstly, that I'm a woman. Secondly, that I'm not even a white woman. I mean, where is the chance that I will get it? And the manager insisted, and I know she did go and speak. And today, Priyanka Chopra and her co-actor, who's a white male actor and a very famous actor,
Right.
they're both getting paid exactly the same money for doing Citadel. And this is an example from mainstream cinema industry, where we know there are so many biases. We've read about it, we've seen movies around those biases, and there is a change and a shift that's happening. So I do think that equity is increasingly becoming a strategic conversation. I think leaders just need to sort of own that up, and help organizations drive their equity, because honestly, this is a top agenda, this is a top leader agenda. It can't be driven from bottom, right? It's a top down approach that you need to build, and I think there is an increasing awareness on that one.
Right. Right. So if a company is doing well on, say, diversity and equity, whether they can be assumed that they will be doing well on inclusivity also, and what is the importance of the inclusivity?
you know Creating a diverse organization is very different from creating an inclusive workforce, and I
Right.
think people be it's if you're only creating a diverse organization, then you're only being tokenistic to look good on your numbers and stats and everything, but
Right.
honestly, if your people don't feel a sense of belonging to that workplace, having created that diverse organization, you're actually doing a disservice to the organization, right? So I think both need to work hand in hand, and both need to be treated with equal importance, and one leads to the other, right? If you're building a diverse workplace, please make sure that you're also building an inclusive organization for that diverse workforce to thrive in your organization, right? So
Right.
and that really uh, an inclusive work culture, for example, is truly is a signal of an organization that's committed to working towards building safe workspaces for their people, where people are able to, be successful, bring their authentic selves to work, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't want to sound very theoretical, but there's some 7, 8 things I was thinking, when I read the question about what are some of the things that I as a, I belong to an organization and I truly feel that we are fairly compliant when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. What did we do when we were, building this as a strategic pillar for us? So one of the things I think we started was to build awareness and educate our managers at the workplace. A lot of times, it's very easy to sit here and complain to say that, listen, my organization is not really diverse and inclusive, but you really need to understand the problem and the cause. When we train our managers, it's not that the managers don't want to be practicing inclusion, just that they've not been exposed to it, and therefore it's our responsibility as leaders or as HR people or whichever fraternity that we belong to educate managers to truly believe in the importance of inclusion at workplace and show them some clear success stories, the impact of what it could do to work, etc. Right. The second thing is the policies that we have. Right, they need to be progressive to really promote inclusion. For example, is my hiring policy, is my recruitment policy allowing for all kinds of people to come into the organization? Simple things like do I have job descriptions where I use a lot of pronouns as opposed to keeping them gender agnostic? Do I look at resumes as blind resumes and not get governed by the gender of who the person that's applied for the job, right? Similarly, from an insurance standpoint, and I will talk more about it when we discuss the questions around gender representation, LGBTQ. But again, insurance and policies, etc., need to be definitely progressive. Holiday calendar. I have people from different religions, different backgrounds who are in my workforce. Can I make my holiday calendar in such a way that people are able to practice their religion and take off when they need to take off, right? As opposed to just having those 10 days off in a year, irrespective of whether it matters to me or not, right? So so basically having progressive work policies. The other thing that I feel is important is, set goals on inclusion, have clearly defined goals on inclusion, and let people know about that and talk about the progress of those goals. So have candid, open systems where people can know what's happening in the organization, and they can also give you feedback on what could be better. It takes a fair amount of bravery and courage for organizations to do that, but I think that really separates an organization that's very committed on DEI versus someone who's not. Then, for example, celebrate the differences in your organization to make everybody feel included. Like I said, festivals, right? Celebrate Eid, celebrate Christmas, celebrate every other festival that's important to, even if it's a small fraction of your people. Let people talk about, and this is a bold one, but let people come and talk about their stories of discrimination, so that it builds more empathy in the organization for people to know that, what did I go through, and therefore to make sure that it's not repeated, at least in the workplace that I'm currently working in, right? That's it. So
because many of these things people do unknowingly. It's
exactly the unconscious bias. They don't know that they're doing it, but they're doing it. And there is a way to actually train people on suspending that bias. Which is why I said that managers training at the beginning is very important. And then, the other thing which I feel, that is 2, 3 things quickly. Having pronouns at the end of your signature, like I use she, her, hers at the end of my signature, because I feel that it helps people know who I am from a gender identity perspective, and unlikely that I shall be therefore discriminated. Of course, we don't compel people to that, but in our organization, for example, we encourage people to use pronouns at the end of their signatures. And also, I think when organizations that are large and that are hiring people constantly, I think talking about inclusion right at the beginning when people are joining, even at the time of onboarding, to show your commitment as an organization will help people who are joining new to know that this place really believes in, promoting inclusivity at workplace, etc. And then there are many other things that you could do, having a DEI council, making safe spaces or safe rooms where people can talk about their challenges, etc. So there are many things, but these are broadly what I would say that if you could, and these are all simple and easy things to do for an organization to practice inclusion in its entirety.
So this is more about, what we can do at the workplace. But like you, I mean, so many other DEI experts also advocate that DEI should be effective when it is done at the roots. I mean, at every stage of an organization. Family is also an organization, college, universities, all these, even temples, religious institutions, organizational institutions, political institutions. All these institutions, I mean, there should be inclusive approach towards adopting DEI initiatives. So, what is your take on to that, and how it can be done? I mean, one is that yes, it will be beneficial, but how to really do these initiatives at these institutions?
So again, uh, my view on this is that, like, for example, for me, when I was growing up as a child, and you talked about, I mean, organization is, even a family is an organization, right? And school is
Right.
an organization, college is an organization. In my growing up years, for example, I did not know the term diversity and equity inclusion because I never felt excluded for being the daughter in the family. I mean,
Right.
and I have an elder brother who's 5 years elder to me, and we were brought up exactly similarly. We were given exactly the same opportunities. He went to a good public school. I went to a good public school. He went to study to Delhi University, to St. Stephen's. I went to study at LSR, in a hostel, and everything after that. I mean, so I never felt that there was anything. There was anything as discrimination that I've experienced. But sadly, when I started getting into the corporate world and I started working, my first experience was actually working in the social sector. When I was working on a World Bank project, and I actually got to see the kind of discrimination that exists. It was appalling to see it, right? I mean, in the rural sector,
Yeah.
particularly where women are far more weaker than men, and in spite of the fact that they work equally hard or sometimes harder. So
Yeah.
that is when that is when I started sort of seeing that. So I think it starts with how we raise our kids. Firstly, Arun, as parents, I think it's our responsibility to raise kids who naturally, are being raised to believe that the world is equal and everyone should be treated equally and fairly, and also having open and honest and candid conversations. Is very important, and not just limited to family, but even in schools and colleges, for example. Today talking about when we talk about people from different sexual orientations, I think that's a conversation that's important to be had with children, because you don't want them to grow up feeling awkward about having a transgender in their class, or a person who's a gay, or a person who's a lesbian, because these are all things that are that should be normalized for our
Right.
children. Then also the environment that the education provides us for in college, in schools, in our postgrads, etc., also plays a very key role in how we shape ourselves up as people. Uh, I studied in an all girls college, and we were a very progressive college when it came to women empowerment and all of that. Uh, so much so that sometimes I felt that we were extremists, when we spoke about feminism. But the logic that time was that you needed to really talk about a cause till it becomes a normal conversation.
Right.
So to keep
Right.
sort of talking of it like a cause. So I think the environment was very helpful. And today, the reason that I feel very strongly about some of these issues is because of what I got in college and what I saw in college. Of course, and my family played a very important role, because I come, like I always say, I'm a Jain person from Jaipur.
Right.
Somebody will understand that being a Jain from Jaipur can mean not so
I'm
progressive.
also from
But
Jaipur, by the way.
oh, lovely. So yes, so see, so that what
I
I'm
can
talking about.
understand. Yeah, yeah, I can
Yeah,
relate with you. Right.
but I had the most progressive family. My grandparents, my parents, and they never stopped us from doing. And I think all of us should be that role
Right.
models for our children. And I think the other thing is the mindset. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we all, and again, mindset is a function of the way we were growing up. So a lot of leaders today, for example, when we look at the organizations, it is not that they're consciously not wanting to bring a change. It's not, but the whole mindset is rooted so much into their growing up years and the way they've seen things happening, that
Right.
for them to really change that is a bit difficult. And I mean, political and religious, I can spend an entire day talking to you about. I mean, the way politics and the way religion have really made the underrepresented groups, make them only weaker and weaker by, with every action
they
that
have
they've
vested
taken.
interest in that.
Exactly. So that doesn't help the cause, right? And we've seen that getting translated into some horrible incidents that have happened in the last few years for the underrepresented group. But I think again, and like I said, it's easy to it's easy to say that the leader of my organization should take the responsibility and should do what they need to do. But I think it is not just about turning that one organization into being a inclusive place. I think where we live, as families, as the education institution that we go to, the kids that we are raising, every aspect of our life, we should be able to translate that the importance of it. And I think that comes from our own self-belief first. And then, of course, we can bring the change that we want to bring. And it's never going to be difficult, because if I believe and if I have the conviction that it's important, and I will do whatever I need to do to bring the positive change. And I think that will automatically lead to creating a society which is truly inclusive in that sense,
Yeah. So, as such, I mean, coming back to workplace, you might have witnessed quite a few memorable and positive DEI encounters. So, if you can give a few examples, I mean, how you took care of those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. Suddenly, there's so many things that are coming to my head, but I'll give you an example of, during I took my role on 1st of March 2020, and we were in pandemic from 17th of March. And we announced a lockdown for our company on the 21st of March. So imagine the role of a chief culture officer, where you're supposed to help build a culture with actually when everything is moved to virtual now, and you're expected to build a culture which is going to be remote. So it was challenging, but I think it was also a good challenge to work with. And one of the areas that I picked up during that time, given the larger context, was focused on initiatives around improving women representation. And I say this because all of us know that during pandemic, we saw the worst decline in women in workforce because of many things that were going on in our country, leading to that number coming down drastically. And that was true for my organization also. And I know a lot of young women who would reach out and say that they were finding it very hard to manage their work because of because there was stuff at home that they were expected to do. And I think not being in the office, somewhere the family started taking it for granted to say that if you're at home, then you were expected to manage home well. And I think that really put the pressure on some young women who were at different life stages, new mothers, newly married, and so on and so forth. And we did lose a few of women at that time. And that's when, I spoke to a couple of other women leaders, and I said, let's do something to help this situation, and let's find a way to let women, the young high potential women, to learn from the wisdom and knowledge of the senior experienced women leaders who would have gone through a similar situation in their life. And you could benefit them from that wisdom and knowledge. It was as simple as that, and we actually created WPP Stella, which became the Women's Mentoring Network, where we had, in the first year, which was in 2020, we had 150 women who signed up for the program, and each mentor was mentoring 2 young women from within the network, and really helping them talk about their career aspirations, their challenges, their their dreams. Where is it that they're feeling stuck? What is it that they could do differently, etc. So it became something that started off, of course, with the backdrop of the pandemic and helping women, retain in the workforce. And today, it is our largest chapter globally, Arun. We've had about 300 women who've gone through the program thus far, and and women feel that we've been able to create a safe space for them. And I think it's also made the leaders across the board aware of the benefits of the program, men or women. And I think more and more people want to apply for the program. Now we just say that we actually decline because there is only a limit that we can operate with. But I think it's helped build that sense of safety for women at workplace in a way that's very personal. So I think that's one of the gender stories I thought I could share with you in terms of what really started off as a challenge and has now actually become a great story to talk about.
Great.
Yeah.
So now let's look at more on the strategic execution side. But there, I mean, before we start, one of the things I have an observation is that when it comes to the typical financial metrics or any other data point which talks about business and all that, it is explicitly published. But when it comes to DEI initiatives, I mean, nothing on data front is published. It is not celebrated as an achievement if there is any achievement from any organization. So why it is so? I mean, why do you think that actually these kind of data and achievements are not getting published so often?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that there is not enough evidence on the DI related front. I think a couple of things and I think, and also think that's changing, by the way. I mean, again,
Yeah.
from my own organization's content, I can tell you there is data that's published on gender disparity, on how we're doing with representation on at our senior leadership levels, etc. And it's been sort of fairly candid and open about it. I think somewhere the organizations also know, because these are areas that you know there is scope to do better, and you're not doing well enough, and you don't want to come into the limelight for wrong reasons, and be seen in a way that's not right. Also, it still remains to be a sensitive area, as we all know, right? I mean, the amount of flack that one could get uh, in absence of being truly diverse, inclusive, and equal as an organization, there is a potential to really it can create a lot of problems for them. And I think therefore the organizations today, while are becoming aware of the importance of it, I don't think they still have the courage to go out, put it out there. That
Right.
also, and it also comes, and in fact, you gave the answer in the question itself. Finance, for example, there is a clear matrix, right? Every year,
Right.
you are the CFO of the company. I'm sure you give targets to your business heads to say that this is your target, this is what you need to work towards. If you underachieve, what are the implications? If you overachieve, what are the benefits? If you and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
In case of a diversity, equity, inclusion targets, for example, firstly, there are no targets given. Very rarely do organizations have targets. Secondly, if there are targets given, and potentially they should be linked to your performance, right? How financials are linked to performance, your DI
Yeah.
performance should also be linked to performance. And I think if you're able to do that, if you're able to treat DI at par with the way you treat the business targets, I think that is the day when we will truly become. We'll be truly able to say that we are being a purpose-led, responsible organization.
Right.
Some do it really. Some have started doing it. I think there are many others who still need to sort of have the guts and the courage to take that, bite the ball and go through that. It won't be easy in the initial few years because and we know that there's progress to be made. But I do think that is when we'll see the shift happening in the diversity, equity, inclusion space.
So what can be the best practices around it? I mean, some may be small, some may be big, but what kind of best practices which can be adopted to ensure that it is not just an ornamental slogan, but at the same time it is an initiative which is getting some kind of achievement?
Since I'm talking to the CFO, I would say have targets. How you have
Yeah.
targets for business, have targets on the DI data. Like if let's say if one of your functions has very less representation on women, can we give a target to say that by next year this number needs to shift from point A to point B, and whatever that it takes therefore to do that, what is the strategy to do that? So I think having targets is the first thing. Second is building the awareness and education. Why is this important, right? Everything if you were to just talk this as a good to have thing, and not so much adding to the strategy of the organization, it will not land for the leaders, I feel, right? So I think
Right.
having that conversation to say that what are the potential benefits of doing this, and there are enough reports, the McKinsey's reports and other reports that talk about organizations that are diverse, inclusive, are far more sustained and successful over a longer period of time versus those who are not, right? So talking about some of the specific benefits of what it can lead to is also an important element that we need to sort of look at from an action perspective. And third is having a council of people who are truly representative of your organization, who actually help set the DI strategy for you to say that what are the things that we need to do, because you need to be hearing voices of all the people in your organization who are different, right? And
Right.
giving them a chance to talk and have their voices heard will automatically lead to creating an organization that will see results, that will see actions which are leading to positive results and positive impact. So I think those are some of the things that would really help. And the last thing, Arun, which I don't advocate it much, but I do think that when organizations are very keen to make that shift happen, right? I think they need to uh, work towards becoming listed on some of these big indexes, whether it's the Bloomberg Index of
Right.
Diversity, whether it's a Great Place to Work certification, or one of those things, because the moment you go through that process, you will automatically start working towards creating actions and initiatives and strategies that will lead to you being featured in those things. And sometimes a good way to show your commitment. So those are some
Right.
of the things I would say will work.
Thanks. That's really insightful. So now actually with this section 377 being now decriminalized, and now LGBTQ community can exercise their rights. But at the same time, if you look at the Indian society, they have still not having such kind of acceptance, right? So what kind of measures you have taken in your organization for the inclusion of LGBTQ? And any kind of sessions or anything you have organized, any kind of training firms which could really help you in this entire process?
Yeah. So, of the three pillars that we have in our organization around diversity, equity, inclusion, uh, women is one of them, people with disabilities the second one, and LGBTQ as a third one. And it's globally, it's one of the areas that we've been working on as a company. But in India, I'll give you specific examples, because in India, again, each country is at a very different stage of evolution when it comes to LGBTQI conversation. I think India is still in its nascent stages, because there is still some amount of taboo around it, and it's not a comfortable topic for many. But I think that's changing slowly and gradually. And in my organization also, it's the same. So, we work with two broad sort of focused areas in this. One is sensitization, because till you don't know, you will not be able to make a change or a
Correct.
positive shift. So we are focusing a lot on sensitization and helping the entire organization understand the community, what are the nuances of the community, what's the genesis of the community, who all fall within that community, and therefore what can all of us collectively do as an organization to really make them feel included in our workspace, right? So that's the first thing that we're doing. We've started with, training our CEOs across all our agencies. We've trained all our HR leaders and recruitment folks. And now we're going to run these sensitization workshops across the organization, which is about 11,000 people spread over multiple geographies in India. So that's the first step around sensitization. And we
Right.
also do other fun and engaging interventions to build sensitization. For example, because June is the month of Pride, we're doing a queer stand-up show where a stand-up comedian is going to talk about some of their lived experiences. We are getting somebody who's going to come in and enact a play, for mother-child relationship where the child is from the LGBTQI community. So, to parents, what can it mean and how will you deal with that? We're also getting a lawyer to come and talk to us about life after 377. So all of us know that while same-sex relationships have been decriminalized, but in our country, it 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 does not mean that the community has equal rights like we all have, because marriages are still not legalized. For example, I know that, and we all know that Chief Justice Chandrachud has been working a lot on this topic, and we hope that there is going to be some positive change in this context. But I think, what could it mean for whether it's insurance, whether it's opening of bank accounts, whether it's sending kids to school, a lot of these areas, they don't get the same benefits because their marriages are not sort of recognized, right? So I
Right.
think we're building awareness for our people on all these different facets. The second piece that we are working on is called 1:1, which is where we are saying that 1% of all the open positions across our agencies, if we can encourage our CEOs, encourage our HR fraternity and leaders to look at filling that 1% open positions from the community based on skill, merit, role, etc., all of that, right? And 1% is a really small number, but that's the beginning that we want to make to see what it could potentially lead to in terms of change. So I think those are the broad, so sensitization and 1:1 are the two pillars that we are working with. We, of course, work with experts who are external to us. So we are working with external partner organizations who've done a lot of work in this. And we learn from their experience because honestly, and we run a community, by the way, in WPP. It's called the WPP Unite, which is a
Very nice.
community of allies and people from the community who come together. And through this community, we've done everything that I've just spoken to you about. So there is already a group of people who are driving this. It's not just me or my team, but it's actually a group of people who belong to different agencies within the network who are helping us, bring the change in a good way in this space.
Great. I would like to add here that TimesPro is also having a corporate training wing, and they also have a set of experts for these topics. In fact, there is a solution, Equify. Equify is the name of the solution, which is
Nice.
for POSH compliance as well as DEI and all the initiatives around it. Even we provide external chair, we provide TTT for the entire committee, and all these aspects relating to DEI inclusion sense.
Very interesting.
One thing I would like to add here is that while we see that many organizations are sometimes giving even targets also for DEI, but at the same time, when it comes to the leadership level, the inclusion of women and LGBTQIA plus in the leadership roles can really make a different impact, and this can lead to a successful journey towards the objectives of the DEI initiative. So where do you see that, how to actually inculcate that practice where people are able to pick up the leadership roles, and how certain programs or executive education upskilling programs can also help on to that?
Yeah, so I think I completely agree to the point that we don't find enough women in LGBT representation at leadership levels, and that's a reality currently.
Right.
I think what would really help is, one is of course sensitization to the fact that it's an important thing to drive creating a leadership which is very representative and of the organization that you're leading, right? And therefore the benefits of it. For example, where a lot of times in our like in my own organization, when we started back in 2000, when the new leadership was being formed globally, I'm talking about, we only had 18% on the board who were women.
Right.
Today we're almost at 55% women on board. So there's a conscious
great,
sort of and there was a conscious sort of work done towards that. It was done very consciously, with intention, with clear actions, etc. So I think having some sort of a clear sort of a path around that and working towards that is the most important thing. Second is, I think you spoke about the executive education programs and trainings and all that. I think they're important because they help build the competencies and skills that people need to do a job successfully. I wouldn't say that you only need to do it for women or for any other groups of people. I think it's something that should be invested in people to make them successful leaders.
Right.
Very often we hear this, that woman, when she's 70% ready for the role, we not take her because we're not sure whether she'll be able to do justice to that role. And I think that gap needs to be filled. She needs to go for some training, coaching, etc. is a common thing. Whereas a man 70% in the role is always he can manage, and we'll invest in him and he'll do a good job. And again, it's a mindset thing. No, I'm not generalizing, but I've often heard that thing, right? So I think that having a proper program where we invest in our mid-level or where we see the potential, I think making that investment consciously, especially when it's a woman or a LGBTQ, I think is a very important thing. And I think lastly is giving them enough opportunities and platform where they can shine. A lot of times when there is a choice between a man or a woman to be represented on a platform where that there is potential for many others to see them and experience them, I think making a conscious choice to give the underrepresented group to do that is going to be super helpful for them to gain more confidence and also get them to feel more belonged to the organization. And again, we all know that in a leadership at the board level or at a leadership level in a company, the more diverse your group is, the more successful your company is going to be, because you're allowing for multiple views and opinions and ideas to flourish and exist and make them happen. So I think there is also a proven business need to do that more than anything else, So yeah, that's what I would say.
Right, right. So now, in the interest of time, and the participants would also have a lot of questions, so I would hand it over to Dr. Chaudhary, so we can look at all the questions, and Apoorva can answer those.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Apoorva. Wonderful conversation. Absolutely interesting and very inclusive, in fact, I think with a lot of examples. I think before there are quite a few questions before that. I think one of the questions that keeps coming in this space, Apoorva, is I think the manifestations of DI in every company, in whatever small way, for example, let's say, even if I look at the way the building is structured, right? For example, let's say they're building where you can actually have a wheelchair facility, right? Or a washroom where you can have a facility for a disabled person, right? You have varieties of ways in which you can actually manifest your intent of being very inclusive, being encouraging the diversity, as well as obviously the equity part of it. Now, in your own, I think, a very illustrious experience over about 20 years plus, have you seen very in some other initiatives or any other areas where you can expect companies to manifest their intent as far as DA is concerned, Apoorva?
So I would break it down into basically 3-4 areas, Doctor. I think in terms of the policies, I think the policies have become increasingly more progressive in nature when it comes to DI mandates, right? I mean, erstwhile used to be limited to certain areas of DI, but today I think we are far more progressive. Like I said, the recruitment policies have undergone so much of change, the promotion policies have undergone so much change, and so on and so forth. The second part is around, again, in my organizational context, procurement, for example, is a key function in all businesses, right? Today, we consciously look at supplier diversity when we look at procurement. I mean, we don't want to go to the linear expected suppliers that we've been always working with, but I think we've consciously started moving in the space of supplier diversity in that space. Third is in terms of the work that we do and that will again apply to any businesses that you're in. Like for us, a large part of work is around creative. The work that we do around creative media, PR, research, etc. We always try and do some piece of work which is purpose led and which helps build greater awareness for the society at large. And we do a lot of pro bono work also, therefore, where we know that the message that's going to reach out is going to have a multiple positive impact on the society, and it's for a good cause. So I think some of those areas we are very mindfully and consciously working with, which I don't think was part of conversations earlier when we used to talk about DI. And then, of course, the infrastructure plays a very key role, like you said, right? I mean, today, in both our campuses in Delhi and Bombay, we made structural changes to allow for people from LGBTQI community to work. We also want, we've also built spaces for people with disability to be able to work in our organizations. And today we are open to, for example, realigning the workspace. Earlier, it was, again, not something that we would look at, but today we are very open to realigning a workspace to allow for all kinds of people to survive and thrive in our organization. If it means that it needs certain kinds of changes, investments, etc., I think those are all happening consciously. And I think the last thing that has started becoming very, very important, two things actually have become very integral to this conversation on DI is resilience and mental health. Resilience has become such a critical conversation post pandemic for people, and especially in the context of representation, that we are very mindfully working on creating safe workspaces for our people, building more resilient workforces by allowing them to be authentic, talk about their challenges, problems, and helping solve for those challenges and problems. And mental health is a related topic, therefore, right? We've activated our employee assistance program in such a way that there is an access to mental health support at all times for our people. We are creating more and more programs around mental health allyship, and again, just the fact that we're able to have a conversation on this topic, which again was a taboo till a few years back, is something we're consciously working towards. And I know many organizations, when I say we, I mean I'm not just speaking about WP, but I'm saying many corporates in the industry are working and moving towards that direction. So yeah.
Thank you, Apoorva. Very insightful, in fact. This is a fairly long question from Jyoti Ranjan Pradhan, but let me read out for you. In one of my known startup company, leaders, including ladies, were in favor of not hiring young female who are about to get married for a certain position, as after marriage their priorities would change and they might leave company under certain conditions, like husband is working in some other state. What's your view on this issue, as this incident is completely against diversity and equity and inclusivity, and how leaders can change their views? Thank you, Jyoti.
My view is appalling, obviously. I mean, it shouldn't happen. Also, just for this group to know today, asking questions around a person's life plan, whether when is the person going to get married or when is the person going to have a child, etc., is not allowed for. In fact, we train our people to say that these questions are not acceptable to be asked, because you can actually be sort of, there's a complaint that can be made against you. And obviously, I mean, it is needless to say that, uh, why should you think that a woman will have to leave her job because the husband's going to shift to another city or is going to have a baby? I think organizations today are far more progressive and open, and today everything is around flexibility. We know that today people can be wherever and they can sort of continue to work and deliver what they need to deliver. So I think that mindset, of course, is not correct, and I think we should. I mean, as people who are who believe in access to fair job opportunities, I think we should be telling people when such things happen to not allow for such things to exist in the organization.
Thank you, Apoorva. I think I'm sure that is going to be a norm very soon across companies. Sometimes a lot of companies, employees take exception to those kind of either remarks or I would say the suggestions. But yeah, I think in the months and years to come, I think that's going to become norm in any case. And we have the last question for today evening, and we are already 2 minutes past 7 o'clock. But I'll just have the last week. I think one of the questions that has come up here in the chat box is. How do you make this DEI as a strategic initiative? Because in one of conversation, in your conversation with Arun, you said that it has to be a top-down approach, right? Right, it has to be, right? So from that point of view, especially if you look at the Fortune 500 Indian companies, Apoorva, right? 35% of these companies are family business owned companies, right? That's the nature of this. So how do you bring in this agenda into such companies where the families, I mean, they have their own point of view, which I mean, of course, we're not questioning that. We are here to respect that. But at the end of the day, now that they also become part, part of the lexicon, because in terms, if you are a Fortune 500 Indian companies, definitely there are aspirations for a lot of Indian people or maybe across the globe to be a part of those companies. Having said that, how do you plan to, or what's your suggestion to include this mandate as a part of such family-run businesses as well, Apoorva?
I think one of the things, Doctor, like you said, because these are family-run business and they're running from generations to generations, I think the younger generation of leadership should hopefully, are progressive and have been educated in spaces where they understand the importance of this. And I think they should be able to help bring the change in the organization. Second is the empirical evidence. Like I was telling Arun also, right? I mean, we know what it could do to the organization. So if an organization which is homegrown has the aspiration to become global and has the aspiration to grow large, will have to sort of make this a strategic imperative and not keep it as a good to have things. Like I said, that to me, DI is a strategic pillar, like your financials are, like your processes are, and many other things that you make part of your strategic imperatives, right? So I think to me that is the important. And third is the kind of workforce therefore you're hiring will help you determine why is it important, because a lot of these organizations today have workforces that they're hiring from the best of education institutions. They go to campuses on day one, they want to get the best of talent, they're willing to pay the highest money, etc. And I think these are again people who will hopefully help bring the change in the organizations. And last but not the least is the talent function. How do you invest and how do you see your talent function? Is it I hate the word when people say it's a support function, because in my view, it is not a support function. It is as important as any other function in the business, because finance brings money to the organization. I think people bring credibility, respect, and trust to the organization. And I think all of them need to coexist. You can't have one over the other. And I think that will really help, sort of having that awareness and education will help bring the change.
Thank you, Apoorva. Thank you, Arun. Once again, it's a wonderful conversation. I'm sure all of our participants who are executive themselves and who are managing teams in their own capacity, and in one sense, they're all business leaders in their own sense. I'm sure they have a lot of actionable insights from this session. And to make sure that the DA becomes no longer, like Arun said, an ornamental jargon there, but it is going to be a strategic agenda. Maybe baby steps would be taken, because that has got to be part of, and because like you rightly said, evidence and research has proven that more inclusive companies are able to sustain their profitability over long horizons. That's what the research has shown. I'm sure all of them will take away, they will have these actionable insights from the session. Thank you once again, Apoorva, from all of us at TimesPro, and also from all of our participants. So once again, thank you so much. Thank you, Arun.
For
Thank you.
having me.
Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Arun. Lovely meeting you. Thanks, Doctor.
Thanks.